So as you know, they are viruses. They are grouped into various families and characterized into various groups. So arbovirus, these are the three of one which causes VHF. That is your viral hemorrhagic fever. So today we'll talk on viruses. Okay, as the name suggests, viral hemorrhagic fever. So there are group of viruses which typically causes the fever, which ultimately leads to the hemorrhage. So, so these viruses, they are enveloped viruses, and they are geographically restricted to the area where the host is present. So these viruses, they have a vector, right? They have a host and a vector. So these are restricted to area where the host species live. For example, Ebola virus is common in Africa. It's found in Africa only. Then some of these infections, these viral hemorrhagic infections, some of them, they are mild, they settle on their own. For example, dengue fever as such, it settle on its own. But there are certain, although dengue fever if may also lead to severe, can reach to a severe state, but diseases like Ebola is life-threatening and severe. So, and the reservoir, their survival depends on the animal and insect vector. So they have vector and the host. They have a reservoir. So they survive in these reservoir. And humans, they are not the natural reservoir. So these viruses, they survive in animal and insect vectors, which act as the reservoir. And the humans, they don't survive in human. They are not their natural host. And they occasionally transmitted to humans through contact with excretion of infected animals or through arthropods. Right? So human can get infection through arthropods, that is your insect vectors, or one can get infection when they come in contact with the excretion of the infected animals. So once the virus infects humans, the person-to-person transmission occurs when an uninfected person comes in contact with the bodily fluids, for example in Ebola, or by the bite of arthropod vectors, for example in dengue. So Ebola, if the person is infected, then that infected person, when come in contact with uninfected person, so that uninfected person can get the infection through the body fluids, so which is seen in Ebola. And in dengue, it is through the vector, that is your Aedes mosquitoes. Aedes mosquito will bite the infected person, then again, if that same mosquito will bite another uninfected person, so that person will get infection. So this is how the transmission takes place from person to person. And these VHF, they presents with, general symptoms of fever. You find fever very commonly. There's weakness, there's muscular pain, which is seen. So coming to the epidemiological patterns, they occur either sporadically or they also occur in seasonal outbreaks. For example, dengue in our India, in our country, we have the seasonal outbreaks. Then, or they sometimes occurs as a explosive epidemics. Like for example, Ebola in Africa in 2014 occurred as an epidemic. Then most of these they don't have any definitive treatment. We generally have to manage the case by giving supportive treatment. And no vaccine is available for VHF except for yellow fever and the dengue fever. So vaccine we only have for dengue fever and the yellow fever, or viral hemorrhagic fever. So this was all about general. So now coming to the various viruses, like as I told you, there are three common groups which causes VHF: arbovirus, your filovirus, and your rodent-borne virus. So coming to the arboviral infections, these are arthropod-borne viruses. And they are basically, they are transmitted by, these are RNA-containing viruses, and they are transmitted by blood-sucking arthropods, that is by the arthropod-borne viruses. That is, they are transmitted by insect vectors from one vertebrate host to another. And the virus, it multiplies inside the insect, and it establishes the long harmless infection in them. So these viruses, they multiply in the vector host, they multiply in them, and they don't harm the vector as such. They remain there in them. So this is a general feature of arboviruses. There are various families in arboviruses, like we have Togaviridae, and this Flaviviridae, Bunyaviridae, Rheoviridae, Rhabdoviridae. So these are the families which are there in arboviruses. And in Togaviridae, if you see, these are the common viruses. And for example, like chikungunya is common in our country, although it doesn't causes hemorrhage much. It is associated with fever and arthritis. Then Nyong virus, Marayo virus, Rose. These are the various viruses which we see in Togaviridae and with their respective host vector. Sorry, and their reservoir. So chikungunya, the vector is also Aedes, and it is very much we have it in our country. Then these are the other viruses: Eastern equine encephalitis virus, Western equine encephalitis virus. These causes encephalitis as such, and they are not common in our country. We don't have any. We don't see the infection by these viruses in our country. Then in Flaviviridae, this is also very common, like Japanese. This table is showing you about the arbovirus as a whole. So Japanese bee encephalitis. So all this you will study basically like Japanese bee encephalitis. You will study in CSF. The infections of your CNS system. So just to give you a gist of what all is included in arbovirus, then Japanese bee encephalitis virus, it is very much there in our country. It causes encephalitis, and these are the other viruses, although they are not seen in our country, in Asia, in our country. Then Flaviviridae. So in Flaviviridae, we have common one is dengue virus, which causes your hemorrhagic fever. Then yellow fever virus, which also causes hemorrhagic fever, but we don't have yellow fever virus in our country. We don't have this particular virus in our country. Both are transmitted. Both the vector is Aedes mosquito, that is the Aedes aegypti. Then Cassino forest disease. This is also there in our country. It is seen in Karnataka, and it is transmitted by vector is tick, and the virus resides in monkey and rats, and causes hemorrhagic fever. Then these are not common in our country. And Zika virus. Zika virus also belong to Flaviviridae, but it doesn't cause hemorrhagic fever. So it causes fever and arthritis. So we will not touch upon the Zika. Then Bunyaviridae. These are the various viruses. So among these, Bunyaviridae, Crimean Congo hemorrhagic virus is the one which causes hemorrhagic fever, and we do have cases. In our country, in Gujarat, there was an outbreak in 2011, and vector is tick. So a little bit about Crimean Congo fever, I will touch upon. Then Rheoviridae. So none of the virus causes hemorrhagic fever, and the Rhabdoviridae. So basically, this table shows you basically the various families which are including arbovirus. So arbovirus is basically the arthropod-borne viruses. The viruses which are, the vector is your insect, which it could be Aedes, it could be mosquitoes, could be tick. So it has various families: Togaviridae, then Flaviviridae, Bunyaviridae, Rheoviridae, so on and so forth. So in general, arbovirus infection, they may present with fever, rash, or arthralgia group. They are encephalitis group, then hemorrhagic fever group, which we'll talk upon. Then some of them may be associated with more than one clinical syndrome, like dengue virus. So these arboviruses, they are zoonotic infections. Yes, all arboviruses, they are not viral hemorrhagic fever. Yeah, they are not VHF. Okay, this is important. So as I told you in the table, the particular viruses which causes hemorrhagic fever. Then all these arboviruses, they are zoonotic, and these are maintained in nature between animal and the insect vector. So they cycle. These viruses, they maintain in the animals and the insect vectors. Humans, they are accidental hosts, and they don't play important role in the maintenance or transmission cycle of the virus, except in urban yellow fever and the dengue. And there are various arthropod vectors. So these viruses, they're transmitted by vectors, the arthropod vectors, which could be mosquito or could be for tick, or sometimes rarely sandfly and other insects. So coming to the geographical distribution, they are vary greatly in their geographical distribution. For example, yellow fever, as I told you, it is not seen in our country. It is mostly seen in West Africa, and we don't have yellow fever in our country. Although we have the vector is there, but we don't see the infection of yellow fever in our country. Then these encephalitic arboviruses, they occur in American North America, whereas in India the Japanese encephalitis is common. So these are the various arboviruses found in India. Is hemorrhagic fever group. We have dengue fever, Cassandra forest fever, then fever with arthralgia group, that is chikungunya. Then encephalitis group, we have Japanese P encephalitis. So these are important for you as of the infection in India is concerned. This the hemorrhagic fever group and the encephalitis group. So a general about the diagnosis. So we look for antigen. We can look for antibodies. We can isolate the viruses. We can culture them. So viral culture is different from the bacterial culture, fungal culture. You must have read in your initial chapters that they don't grow in your blood agar or SDA and all that stuff. We need new cell lines, right? So their processing is absolutely different. So virus can be isolated in mosquito. We can inoculate in the mosquito. We can use the species, and we can use various mosquito cell lines. Then we can use mammalian cell lines, and we can also go for inoculation, animal inoculation, that is suckling mice. We can intracerebrally inoculate the specimen. So this is general about your arboviral infections. Then we can go for antigen detection in blood. For example, I will tell you that we look for NS1 antigen in dengue. Then we can go for molecular test like RT-PCR, reverse transcriptase PCR or real-time PCR. So that was a general about arboviruses. Now coming to specific, the infection, hemorrhagic fever, most commonly which occur in our country is dengue fever. And the dengue, you must have heard about this particular infection. It occurs, in our country almost every year, and generally it is seen in in rainy season, during monsoon season, because the cases generally rise during that time. So this dengue virus it's most common arbovirus found in our country, and it belongs to Flaviviridae, and it's the enveloped virus containing single-stranded RNA, positive sense, single-stranded RNA. And this particular virus, it has four serotypes. That is dengue virus 1, 2, 3, and 4. And recently, fifth serotype has also been discovered. That is DEN5 in Bangkok in 2013. But we don't see this fifth serotype in our country as of now. So coming a little bit on the structure, it is enveloped virus, spherical, and if you see, this has positive sense RNA genome surrounded by capsid and envelope, and it also has these glycospikes like glycoproteins. So they also show the heme agglutination property, which can be used in its diagnosis. Then, if coming to the genomic structure, as I told you, it is a single-strand positive sense RNA. And it has 3 structural genes and 7 non-structural genes. So this is non-structural genes. They are structural genes, which is code for capsid, membrane, and envelope. And they are non-structural structural genes. There are 7 non-structural genes, which is NS1, NS2A, NS2B, NS3, Then NS4A, NS4B, and NS5, these which are these non-structural genes, they are involved in replication. Whereas structural genes, they are involved in making the structure of the. They code the core proteins. These structural genes they code the core protein, that is your capsid, your membrane proteins, your envelope. They are involved in that. This was important because we go for we detect this particular NS1 antigen. That is why I'm showing you this slide. So coming to the vector, Aedes aegypti is a principal vector, followed by Aedes albopictus, and this particular vector, this mosquito Aedes, it bites during the daytime more, right? And it is a nervous feeder, so it bites repeatedly from one person to another to complete his blood need, and it resides in the domestic places. So it is a nervous feeder. It will bite repeatedly. And Aedes albopictus, it is found in peripheral urban areas. It is aggressive and concordant feeder. So therefore, that is why it is less efficient in transmission. So most common vector which is involved in dengue is Aedes aegypti. So this is Aedes aegypti mosquito, and we can identify these mosquito. They have these stripes in the leg, so tiger leg appearance they give that. So name is like, and they bite during day, and they generally grow in the clean water. So that is why you must have seen the hoardings and everywhere we see they don't clean your coolers, don't allow water to collect in pots and all, because it survive in clean water. So Aedes become infective only when it feeds the viremic patient. That is the patient who is already infected with dengue virus and the virus is there in the blood. So when the Aedes mosquito will infect the viremic patient, it will become infected. The virus will undergo extensive incubation period in the Aedes, in the insect vector, which will last for 18 to 10 days. And then once it becomes infected, then it will infect another person. So when this particular mosquito will bite another person, then it will transmit the virus to that person, and this is how the infection keep on spreading. So Aedes can pass the dengue virus to its offsprings. That is, they also show the transovarial transmission. And as I told you, transmission cycle is between man and Aedes, which is principal reservoir. And the transmission cycle of 4 serotypes do not involve the other animals. And this fifth serotypes, sometimes that fifth serotype, it follows a sylvatic cycle. Now coming to the pathogenesis. So dengue as such, it is the vector is Aedes mosquito, Aedes aegypti, which you need to remember, right? And we have various vector control programs based, on various these vector diseases which are transmitted by the vectors. So the pathogenesis, we have this primary dengue infection. It is when the infection occurs for the first time from any one of the serotypes. So that is known as, if the patient is getting infected for the first time with any serotype, that is a primary dengue infection. But what happens is, maybe after months or years later, the more severe form of dengue illness occurs. That is also known as secondary dengue infection. And this infection occurs with another serotype, which is different from the first serotype. So if the first primary infection, the patient is infected with any serotype, but the second primary infection, that is secondary, dengue infection, that is lead to severe disease, and it is when the patient is infected with another serotype, which was different from the first serotype causing primary infections. So what is the antibody response which we see in the dengue viruses? We have these neutralizing antibodies which are formed. You know that whenever we get infected, our body responds. It forms antibodies. So it has formed neutralizing antibodies. So these neutralizing antibodies, they are protective in nature, and these antibodies, they are produced against the infective serotype, which lasts lifelong, as well as against the other serotypes which last for only some time. So if you are infected with dengue virus 1, our body will produce neutralizing antibodies to that particular antigen, to that particular virus, dengue virus 1, and it remain long last. And they're non-neutralizing antibodies. These last lifelong, and they're heterotypic in nature. That is, they are produced against other serotypes. As I told you, our body also produces antibodies against other serotypes, but they're not against the infective serotypes. So what happens is, when these antibodies, these non-neutralizing antibodies, they're produced following the first serotype infections, they will bind to the second serotype during secondary dengue infection, but they will not neutralize it, right? In the secondary dengue infection. So, in fact, it protects the virus from the host immune system by inhibiting the B cell activation against the second serotype. So, this is known as the antibody dependent enhancement. So, because antibodies which are there, they're non-neutralizing type, during secondary infection, they are not able to neutralize the serotype and in fact, it promotes the growth. It protects the virus from the host immune response. So, they are not, our immune system are not able to kill them. So, this phenomena is known as antibody dependent enhancement. So, because of the antibodies, there is enhancement of the infection. This is what you see in secondary dengue infection. That is why secondary dengue infection is more severe, because the antibodies, they are not able to neutralize them. This is very important for you, because antibody dependent enhancement is seen during secondary dengue infection, which lead to severe disease. So these non-neutralizing antibodies, they promote recruitment of mononuclear cells, followed by release of cytokines. So there is more of cytokine release, which we see, which will further, lead to various manifestations, and will, increase the severity of the disease. So among all the serotype combinations, ADE, that is antibody dependent enhancement, is remarkably observed when serotype 1 is in serotype 1 infection, followed by serotype 2, which also claims to be the most severe form of dengue infection. So this was about, the pathogenesis. This is important. We have primary dengue infection. We have secondary dengue infection. Secondary dengue infection is very severe because there is a antibody dependent enhancement. Antibodies which are produced during primary dengue infection, they are not able to neutralize the secondary infection because the serotype is different. And in fact, this is how the virus will not be killed and disease will progress. So, coming to the classical, clinical classification, the dengue, they generally they have 3 clinical stages: dengue fever, dengue hemorrhagic fever, and dengue shock syndrome. So, this is classification based upon severity. And if you see this, the criteria of dengue, which are there, and there are some warning signs like probable dengue is when there is nausea, vomiting, rash, and we confirm it. We confirm it with the laboratory test. Then there are certain warning signs like abdominal pain or tenderness, clinical fluid accumulation, then mucosal bleed, if there is restlessness, and there are the change in the parameters like their platelet count decreases rapidly. These are the warning signs. And what are the criteria of severe dengue is that in severe dengue, basically there is a leakage of plasma. Plasma will leak, and this will eventually lead to hemorrhage and multi-organ failure. So there is severe plasma leakage, which will lead to your shock syndrome, dengue shock syndrome, then fluid accumulation, which will lead to respiratory distress, then severe bleeding, which is seen because of hemodynamic instability, and it will start affecting your organs, CNS, liver, and so on and so forth. So basically, you need to remember is that there is a dengue fever which will subside on its own, but if not treated in secondary infections, it may lead to dengue hemorrhagic fever, which may also further lead to dengue shock syndrome. So this is all about the dengue case classification. So that is why you must understand that the manifestations of dengue hemorrhagic fever and dengue shock syndrome, these are basically because of the virus and the antibody complex which is formed, because of the that ADE. So the factors determining the outcome, like type 2 is more dangerous than the other serotypes, then sequence of infection, if serotype 1 is followed by serotype 2, then it has been seen that children less than 12 years are more prone to develop DHF and DSS. Then dengue during pregnancies, the perinatal transmission of dengue infection can occur during, pregnancy. And perinatal maternal infection lead to symptomatic infection in newborns where they present with fever, thrombocytopenia, cytase, pleural effusion, and they typically this occur during the first week of life. So if we could see the geographical distribution, it very common in South Asia and Western Africa. And so this is data basically about 50 million of dengue cases. They occur worldwide, out of which 5 lakh, they mostly children, they proceed to DHF. Now coming to India, it's prevalent in urban cities and towns, and in 2019 they were greater than 1.3 lakh cases which were reported, with greater than the deaths, which is maximum were from Karnataka and Gujarat. So in India we have all the 4 serotypes, dengue serotypes. Most commonly widespread are the dengue virus 1 and 2, and 5 has not been reported yet from our country. So now coming to the laboratory diagnosis. So how can we detect? We can either detect the dengue virus, which we can isolate them by culture, or we can go for viral nucleic acid, genome detection, or we can detect the antigen, or we can detect the antibodies. So these are the 2 modalities mainly, and I will touch upon the antigen first, then the antibodies, because this is most commonly done. Viral culture is not commonly done, and NAT test, they are now commonly can be done with a molecular test. So first is that we can go for antigen detection, as there is a period of viremia. So during first 5 days of infection, we can look for antigen. So these 3 tests, they are good if you do it in the first 5 days, because there is viremia, there is virus in the blood. So if you take a blood sample, we can easily isolate it. Specificity is high during first 5 to 7 days, right? And since you all know that, if you recall your immunity chapter, that antibodies, they appear later, after 1 week. So if we take sample, and if you take sample on the second day of the fever, and if you ask, I want antibodies, so antibody will not be there. So it will give false negative test. So that is why you should know which test is to be done when. So during first 5 to 6 days, we can isolate the virus, we can detect the virus by these methods, and after that we can go for antibodies. So we can detect the antigen, NS1 antigen non-structural gene, as I told you previously in the slide I showed you that we have these 7 non-structural genes. So we can detect this NS1 antigen, which is can detect by ELISA. We have these ICT formats which are available to detect the NS1 antigen in the serum. So we take the blood sample, we isolate the serum from that. This NS1 antigen, so you all know that we look for there's a test, there's a control line, there's a test line. So control line is important because it shows that the test is valid, and if a test line also comes, then our test is positive. So please recall your antigen antibody reaction chapter. So this NS1 antigen becomes detectable from day 1 of the fever and remain positive up to 8. So this is good test during initial period. It's highly specific. It differentiates between various between flavivirus. Then that was about antigen. Then antibody detection. So in primary infection, the IgM appears after 5 days of fever and disappears within 90 days. So if you're taking sample after on 10 days, then you can ask for antibody detection test because your IgM will appear. So they appear after 5 days and they disappear within 90 days. So that is why this is important. You will not ask for the antibody test during the first day or the second day of the fever because the antibody will not appear, right? And IgM is detectable at low titer in 14 to 21 days of the illness, and then it slowly increases. In secondary infections, with IgG titer, the antibody titer, they rises rapidly in secondary infections, and IgG is often cross reacts with many flavivirus, so it may give false positive result after recent infection or vaccination with yellow fever or JE fever. So the IgM titer as such in secondary infection, they are significantly low and they may not be even detectable. So if you're looking for the secondary infection, then the IgM levels will, they're of no use. We go for IgG antibodies or we go for uh, the ratio of IgG and IgM. And in past infections, if the low level of IgG remain detectable for over 60 years, and in the absence of symptom, it is useful indicator of the past infection. So if you're looking for the past infection, because you all know that IgG will remain for all throughout life in most of the infections, so we will go for IgG levels, right, in past infections. So if you see this graph, this primary dengue infection, secondary dengue infections, in primary dengue infection, initial 5 days, if you see, we can go for antigen detection because antigen, the virus is there in the blood. There's viremia, we can isolate, take the blood sample, isolate, then centrifuge it, take out the serum. We can go for the NS1 antigen detection. We can, culture the virus during this time because the chances are high, isolation of chances of virus is high. Then IgM we appear after 550 and they remain there up till 90 days. So this is the time period where you will find the IgM antibodies. Then IgG, they appear and they remain lifelong. This is what in primary dengue infection. Secondary dengue infection is that IgG levels, they appear, they rises rapidly. This is IgG rises rapidly, and IgM levels, they are undetectable. They are in very low titer, so they are not detectable. And similarly, you can go for an NS1 virus detection in during initial days of 5 to 6 days. So how can we detect the antibody? We can go for MAC ELISA, that is IgM antibody capture ELISA. We can detect antibodies IgM with the help of the ELISA. Then we can also go for various neutralization tests like plaque reduction test and microneutralization test, which are available. You must be aware of what is plaque reduction test, and this has been covered in antigen antibody reaction, right? The antigen, basically plaque if your sample has antibodies, we add our antigen over it, they will combine, and then we'll add this in a monocell layer and we look for the plaque formation, right? We detect the number of plaques. So this MAC ELISA is based upon capturing the human IgM antibodies on microtiter plate using anti-human IgM antibodies followed by addition of dengue virus antigen. And this antigen used for this assay are they are derived from the envelope protein of the 4 dengue virus serotypes. So this is a microtiter plate which has this anti-IgM, this new chain, right? It is there in the microtiter plate, and this, as I told you, the antigen is derived from the envelope protein. So this antigen is from the envelope protein, right? This system is there in your ELISA plate. उसके बाद हमने patient का serum डाला, which will have the IgM. It will bind if the specific is there. It will bind. Then we will add the antigen, which is there with the kit, followed by the anti-dengue antibodies conjugated with enzymes, and then we'll look for the, with the help of the spectrometer, we'll look for the color. So this is what is your MAC ELISA, where we capture human IgM antibodies on microtiter plate using anti-human IgM antibody. So that was about antigen and antibody detection, various methods. Now coming to the virus isolation, then we have these mosquito cell lines where we can, culture these viruses such as C6 and 36. Apart from this, we can go for we can, isolate the mice, the virus in the suckling mice also. Then molecular methods, we can go for RT-PCR, and we can use these molecular methods for detecting the genotype. So RT-PCR is the most sensitive and specific method, and it is used for detection of, the serotypes circulating, and we can quantify the virus in the blood with the help of the RT-PCR. So in general, if you see, these are the direct methods: virus isolation, genome detection, antigen detection, and the specificity is high, and indirect methods, which is done later after 5th day, and the specificity is not that good. So there are advantages and disadvantages. Like virus isolation is yes, it is more specific. It gives a reliable result. If we are able to isolate the virus in a cell line, then we detect it by a cytopathic change or by the various other methods. If you recall your chapter of general viruses, but it's time consuming. It has low sensitivity. It's expensive, and we need expertise. Then RT-PCR is highly sensitive and high sensitive, and it has high sensitivity and specificity, but it requires specialized instruments and involved careful handling because cross contamination is very common. Then NS1 antigen is very commonly done. It is an inexpensive test and it is a rapid test. Okay, the results they occur we can get results in few hours. They're easy to operate, but there's higher chances of cross reactivity with other antigen and antibodies. So they sometimes may give false positive or negative result. And it required acute sample. So this is very important for you. So in Viva, people will ask when you will do NS1 antigen. So this is important. This is done in acute sample during first initial days. If you say after 15 दिन के बाद मैं sample मैंने लिया मैं NS1 antigen करूँगा, so that is not advisable. Although it may become positive, but better you go for the antibody test, or you can go for both. Then serological test. This have to be done after 5th day. You can't do this test during first, second, third, 4th day. This will not appear. So you need to remember these basics. And it is also rapid test, but it also show the high cross reactivity of other flavivirus. So these are the certain advantages and disadvantages of various tests available. So in summary, up to 5 days of illness in acute stage, go for NS1 antigen detection. Then from 3 days to 2 months, I would say from after 5 days, you go for immunity check, go for IgM detection. Then after 3 weeks, up to live IgT will be detected. Then to differentiate between primary and secondary infection, go for IgM, IgG ratios, and the other parameters where you can monitor your platelet count, hematocrit values. So coming to the treatment, there is no specific treatment available. We manage the patient symptomatically, give supportive therapy, replacement of plasma. Then we correct the electrolyte and metabolic disturbances. Plasma transfusion is required if the platelet count is less than 20,000. Now coming to the vaccine, this was licensed in 2015. It is chimeric yellow fever dengue vaccine, which is live attenuated tetravalent dengue vaccine, and is commercially available as dengue Vaxia, and it was developed by Sanofi Pasteur. And this has made use of live attenuated yellow fever 70D virus as a vaccine vector. So it has this yellow fever 17D virus as a vaccine vector. So it is a chimeric yellow fever dengue vaccine. And it is indicated in age group 9 to 45 years of age. This is a schedule 3 injections given subcutaneously. It's contraindicated in the one who are allergic to vaccines, immunodeficient individuals, in pregnant and breastfeeding women. And WHO recommend to start this vaccine in high burden countries. And it is advised that if this vaccine is given to people who have not been previously infected with dengue, then they may have, it has been seen that they have a higher risk of developing severe dengue following subsequent dengue virus infection. And this is currently available in these regions, Mexico, Brazil and all, and in India we still don't have this because of its safety issues. So this was all about the dengue. Now coming to the other virus, forest disease, that is pure KFD disease. This was first identified in 1957 from monkeys of fever forest in Shimoga district of Karnataka. So this is found in your Karnataka. It belongs to Flaviviridae and it is single-stranded RNA virus enveloped. So here the vector is heart tick. So this वो पहले mosquito से था. This is by the heart tick. The vector is heart tick. Hemophysalis spinigera, right? And the host is monkey, rodents, and squirrels, where the cycle is maintained. The monkeys they act as a amplifier host in this. Here, in this the virus it multiplies. So the monkeys they act as a amplifier host. So it's very common during dry months, and it's endemic in regions of Karnataka, which like it is seen in Shimoga, North Kannada, South Kannada, and so on and so forth. So this is picture of heart tick. Heart tick it has a hard sputum on its body, and you know the you can actually there is a hard tick and soft tick. So the different soft tick causes other diseases, and you can differentiate. I mean, you can see the mouth part from from above. Whereas in soft tick, the part is not seen. So this is just a picture of heart tick because this particular disease is the vector is heart tick in it. So and it has incubation period of 3 to 8 days. So it causes hemorrhage. The patient will present with fever, sudden onset of there will be fever, headache, vomiting, conjunctivitis, followed by the hemorrhage. There's a massive hemorrhage occurs in chest cavity and alimentary canal, and you can also see the meningoencephalitis during the second stage, and it has a case fatality of 5%. So coming to the laboratory diagnosis, we can demonstrate, we can isolate the virus from the blood, and we can go for the IgM antibody detection by ELISAs, and obviously we can go for RT-PCR. So no drug is available. We give supportive treatment, and we have this, the population at risk. They should be vaccinated with killed KFD vaccine, and 2 doses are given. It is a formalin inactivated chick embryo vaccine, and it is given at an interval of at least 1 month, followed by the booster dose at 6 to 9 months after the primary vaccination. Now coming to the other viral hemorrhagic fevers, the family Filoviridae. It contains 2 antigenally distinct genera, that is Ebola virus and Marburg virus. So these 2 viruses, they causes African hemorrhagic fever. We don't have any so far. I have not seen any case by these viruses. And these are filovirus. These are pleomorphic virus. They're long filamentous thread, right? So important point is they have they're long filamentous thread. They're not spherical, which you have studied from previous viruses, ranging from 18 to 100 nanometer, and they have high fatality. This is also very important. The mortality is from 25 to 90%. They have high mortality rates. So Ebola virus has become global threat. Because of its explosive outbreak in 2014, which was seen in Africa, which was and it appeared first in 1976 as African outbreaks in Sudan and Democratic Republic of Congo, and later the outbreak occurred in a village near the Ebola river. That is why the name Ebola virus was given. And these are the various species of Ebola virus: Zaire, Sudan, Bundi Bugyo, Thai forest, Western, and so on. Now coming to geographical distribution. So this basically Democratic Republic of Congo, it continues to report these Ebola outbreaks in recent years, and the most recent outbreak was in June 2020. In India, there's no confirmed case of Ebola as of now, And the largest outbreak occurred in 2014 to 2016, which showed the mortality of 40%. And these were the countries which were affected: Guinea, Libya, and Syria. And so reservoir in these infection is fruit bat. They are expected to infect animals, fruit bats, or primates. This is important. So humans get infection through close contact. There's human-to-human transmission. The body through body fluids, direct contact. When the healthcare workers and close contacts members, they get infected because while treating. And Ebola virus can stay in semen for up to 3 months. So although sexual transmission has not been reported yet, but it is there in semen for 3 months. It shows incubation period of 2 to 12 days, and with common symptoms of fever, headache, sore throat, then followed by vomiting and diarrhea. There will be, you see the diffuse erythematous maculopapular rash and fatigue, then which will ultimately lead to the shock and death. So basically it causes hemorrhage. That is why it comes under hemorrhagic fever. And as I told you, they have a high case fatality rate is around 50%. We can see it has a high case fatality rate. So how you will diagnose it? We can detect the antibody detection in serum. We can detect the antigen. Then RT-PCR, we can look for the virus in the electron microscopy, or we can isolate them in the various cell lines. Treatment is give supportive treatment. So these are the general measures, because it is highly contagious disease. So proper infectious control and sterilization measures need to be taken, and avoid direct or indirect contact with blood or body fluids or other secretions of suspected Ebola case. If traveling to Ebola outbreak area, one should be monitored for 21 days after returning. Avoiding funeral or services, or to wear PPE while doing that. Now coming to the vaccines. So US Food and Drug Federation, that is the FDA, has approved the Ebola vaccine, which is recombinant VSV. This is basically this stomatitis virus. Zaire, Z is Zaire, that is a species Ebola virus. It was in December 2019. So they approved this drug, and this is first FDA drug vaccine for Ebola. And this vaccine can be given as a single dose vaccine, and is found to be safe and protective against the Zaire Ebola virus. So particularly against this species, which causes the largest and the most deadly Ebola virus till date. So this particular vaccine is effective against this particular virus. So we do have a vaccine for Ebola, which has been recently approved. So this is important for you, as a Viva question. Now coming to the Marburg disease. So two large outbreaks that occurred simultaneously in Marburg and Frankfurt in Germany in 1967 that led to the recognition of this disease. And this outbreak was associated with laboratory work using African green monkey, which was imported from Uganda. Then subsequently, other outbreaks and sporadic cases were reported from various parts of Africa, that is Angola and Democratic Republic of Congo, Kenya, and South Africa. So this Marburg and Ebola, it is common in Africa. You find this in African regions. So transmission is by human to human through direct contact or through contact with equipment or other objects contaminated with infectious blood or tissues. And incubation period is for 5 to 10 days. Symptoms, they are sudden onset with general symptoms of fever, headache, myalgia. And after the 5th day of the onset of symptoms, there could be maculopapular rash, which may appear on trunk, followed by nausea, vomiting, and later on it may lead to massive hemorrhage and multi-organ dysfunction. How we will diagnose these infections? Again, we can go for antigen detection, your antibody detection, molecular methods. So basically, in general, for any viral infection, you just remember that we can go for antigen, we can go for antibody detection. Then जितने भी सारे available है, ELISA कर सकते हो, फिर antibody detection, antigen detection हो गया, antibody detection कर सकते हो, same with ELISAs and various ICTs and all. Molecular में जा सकते हो, ठीक है? Then virus को isolate कर सकते हो, right? So this is general about all viral infections which you can do. So you can, if you keep these points in mind, you can write any laboratory diagnosis, especially in viruses of viruses. Now, rodent-borne virus infections. The rodent-borne virus infection or robovirus, they are transmitted from rodents to man by contact with infected body fluids or excretions, and they're maintained in nature by transmission from rodents to rodents without participation of arthropod vectors. So, in rodent-borne infections, it is basically there's no arthropod vector involved in it, and it is transmitted from one rodent to another. So, cycle is maintained like this. There is no arthropod vector. So major rodent-borne viruses are hantavirus and the arena viruses. The hantavirus, it belongs to Bunia viridae, and it is spherical enveloped virus, which is triple segmented, and it is a negative sense RNA. And it transmitted to human from rodents by direct contact with rodent excreta or contaminated fomites. So it has two categories of manifestations. In hantavirus, it occurs as a hemorrhagic fever with renal syndrome, or it may also occur as a hantavirus pulmonary syndrome. So these are the two clinical manifestations which we see, and they are common in Asia, particularly China, Russia, and Korea. And I'm sure you must have heard about this hantavirus outbreak last year in China. It came in the news that we seeing the cases of hantavirus in China. Then the diagnosis is by viral, we can take the RNA by RT-PCR. That is a reverse transcriptase PCR. No specific treatment is available for hantaviral diseases. We give supportive treatment. In arenavirus infection, these are pleomorphic viruses, club-shaped, enveloped with large club-shaped papilloma, and contains segmented single-stranded RNA. And so on the basis of, they are divided into New World viruses and Old World viruses. So Junine and Sabia virus, these are the New World viruses. Old World virus are Lassa virus, lymphocytic choriomeningitis, these are the Old World viruses. So here the transmission to human is basically humans, they are incidental host, and they get infection through contact with excretion of material contaminated with the excretion of the infected rodents. So such as if they ingest contaminated food, or it comes in direct contact of abrated or broken skin with the rodent excrement. This is how one can get infection. And infection can also occur by inhalation. So aerosol transmission has also been seen by the inhalation of tiny particles soiled with rodent urine or saliva. Now coming to the Crimean Congo hemorrhagic fever. This virus, it's a tick-borne virus, and it belongs to family Bunia-Viridae. And this was first characterized in Crimea in 1954 and was given the name Crimean hemorrhagic fever. And then later it was also recognized in 1969 as the illness, cause of illness in Congo. So that is why the name is Crimean Congo hemorrhagic fever. And we find these in Eastern Europe, particularly in Soviet Union and Mediterranean region, Central Asia, and in Indian subcontinent. We do have this Crimean Congo disease. We have cases. And in India, the first case was from Gujarat state during 2001 as a nosocomial outbreak. And some nurses and doctors were, they were killed also because of this particular disease. So transmission is by the heart tick, exotic tick, which belong to genus Hyaloma, and which act as a both vector and a reservoir for Crimean Congo hemorrhagic fever. And there are numbers of wild and domestic animals such as cat, goats, which act as an amplifier for for the virus. The transmission to human is with through the contact with the infected tick or the animal blood, and it can be transmitted from one infected person to another by the contact with body fluids or the infectious blood. So coming to clinical manifestations, sudden in onset with initial symptoms of fever, general symptoms, fever, pain, joint pain, so on and so forth. And then they later on may appear as the PTK may appear on the palate, which is commonly seen. As illness progresses, there will be bruising, nosebleeds, uncontrolled bleeding with basically hemorrhage, and will last for 2 weeks. And it also it has been seen that the CHF the fatality rate CCHF the fatality rate in hospitalized patients ranged from 99 to as high as 50. So fatality rate is also high in this. It is from 9 to 50%. How you can diagnose this particular infection? Again, we can go for antigen capture ELISA, RT-PCR, then your antibodies, IgG, IgM. Treatment is supportive. No vaccine, nothing is available. So yes, that this is from my side. So in this, please, dengue is very important because we have in our country. In fact, what I have told you, we all do have we all have that in our country except for Ebola virus and the Marburg. And Hanta cases are very few. So you need to read about at least what we have in our country commonly. And Ebola and Marburg is also important. You should know a little bit about them. At least which family does it belong, and is there vaccine available? Because recently Ebola vaccine has come up, so it can be a viva question also. And in dengue, you need to know the lab diagnosis and the vaccine. Clinical features are very important. So, yes. So I will end my lecture here. ये चिकनगुनिया बाद में हो जाएगा. It will be covered, I think, in fever with some other disease. It will be in some other disease, right? So I will end my lecture here. See, nested RT-PCR. These are types of RT-PCR. It's altogether a whole new this thing. Basically, in that we make use of two primers. We use one will we take a broad. If you recall your PCR, we target a gene. So in nested PCR, we target a bigger gene. उसके अगेंस्ट प्राइमर डाला, फिर उसके बाद जो प्रोडक्ट आता है उसके अगेंस्ट हम फिर एक और प्राइमर डालते हैं. सो इट इज लाइक दैट, इट्स नेस्टेड पीसीआर. I haven't said anywhere that we will give vaccine after infection. Somebody has asked this question. Protective antibodies. Or why do we give vaccine after? Vaccine is protective. It's a it is to be given before, not after disease. So I haven't said that we give after the patient recover, we give vaccine. You must have interpreted wrong. So I may end my lecture here. Thank you.